Greetings, Mark Garang here, publisher of the Conway Daily Sun. And my guests today are Josh McAllister and Shawn Bergeron. Josh, Shawn?
Thanks for having us.
Josh is you're really the face of HEB, apart from being a baseball coach.
Right.
Yeah. And Shawn, you're just another pretty face, actually.
Yeah. Well, thanks. That's kind of you.
And Shawn, you're the founder of Bergeron Technical Services. And,
Correct.
and people may not know, but you were the town inspector.
I was from April of 1993 until April of 1999.
Well, you were the inspector when we built this building here, and
Yes.
and Kevin McMillan was the builder, and I think he took your name in vain more than once or twice.
Still does occasionally, but he and many others, it's okay.
So anyway, we're going to talk about general things related to what you guys do here, and I'd like to get to the rec path, but I'm teasing that because we want to do that at the end because that's like the sexiest thing to talk
Sure.
about. Sure. So in the news has been the growth ordinance, which was, we don't have to go over all the pieces to it because it's now basically been tabled. But it was really restrictive, and I think the idea is that the town, basically the planning board, just want to kind of freeze development on Route 16 and 302 until the ordinances are rewritten, right? So they get caught up with the master plan. And both you guys spoke against it for different reasons, I think. And so maybe you could just quickly, like, what was the problem with it?
From my standpoint, it was extremely restrictive, and my concerns were what happens to our community if we're basically tabling development for 3 years? What happens in the window after those 3 years? If nobody's developing in Conway for that period of time, is there going to be a trickle-down effect that comes years after that could have an economic impact on the businesses that operate here, whether it's our type of business that kind of relies on some level of development in Conway, or even the tourist industry that we have? Further to that, my concerns was that the restrictions that were there, I was concerned that they were going to show up in the next level of the ordinance. There were some drainage restrictions and technical things that were quite hard to follow through with.
I mean, some of them, the real obvious ones that I saw that were kind of like over the top was like no curb cuts. And that means if you had a piece of land, you couldn't literally do anything with it no matter what.
Right.
And then they had like the 70% vegetation. So it was, it was on its face. There it is. It's going to be restrictive.
Right.
And so what were some of the little technical things that you didn't want to carry forward, if you can?
For me,
remember?
there was a stormwater design parameter of a 100-year storm event. The state level doesn't design to that capacity of stormwater management. It was more of a quantity of stormwater management versus a quality of stormwater management, which I can get behind the quality of stormwater management being where we are. We want to have clean water, clean resources. That's what we rely on as an industry. So for me, it was, why don't we rely on the science that the state, University of New Hampshire have provided the state to create regulations that follow that. So just simply say, follow the state stormwater regulations versus a simple, 100-year storm event. Right. The restrictions on the green space and impervious area were incredibly restrictive. That just, it was a 20% green space or 20% impervious cover on a piece of land. It's more, that would be 8,000 square feet on an acre of land. And it's just, there's no level of development that can even really meet that. So it was written as though there's just not going to be any development for a period of time. And my concern was that it wasn't going to trickle down to future ordinances.
And you were more concerned about I'm sure you're concerned about that, but also the process, right? Was that
Everything that Josh said, I would mirror that. But then, we looked at it, and a lot of the things that I do, frankly, is we looked at that from the perspective of process. And it was important, I think it's always important to follow things as they are laid out, because statutorily, because they're laid out that way for a reason. And one thing that's been missing, interestingly, from Town of Conway's overall site planning and big picture for the future is we don't have a capital improvement plan. And the way that the whole growth management ordinance statute is laid out in New Hampshire law is that you can have a growth management plan. That is unquestionable. However, the capital improvement plan is supposed to have been in place first. So if we have had some success, I think we've had 2 successes in working away from the growth management situation, is that I think the planning board is now endorsing, and I think even the selectmen are endorsing, the need for the capital improvement plan, putting that committee together, and they're going to make that happen, which will be to the benefit of this community in the long run. It will, really, really will. And then, of course, as Josh said, we've been able to set the growth management ordinance aside because, in my opinion, You know, the growth management ordinance was incredibly restrictive, and I'm not saying it was in an underhanded way, but it was really, or it appears to be, an extension of the moratorium that we've now lived through for 2 years, and we're nearing the end of it.
And that was the moratorium on buildings over 50,000 square feet or something, basically a hotel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
But it
And
was aimed at hotels.
it was.
Right.
But and so when you think about it that way, it was aimed at the large hotels. And again, from a state law perspective, they could only have the moratorium for 1 year, renewed for a second year, and then that had to go away. So the growth management ordinance appeared to be a methodology to extend that. Unfortunately, or frighteningly, that method was going to be significantly more restrictive.
Right. Okay. And now you mentioned the capital improvement plan, and they did table it, and they said, oh, until the capital, like we all kind of know what a capital improvement plan, but what does that mean? Does Conway ever had a capital improvement plan? And so what does that mean? They say, oh, our plan is to what? Like, what's the plan? Josh, start there.
So I don't know if we've ever had one in place. I don't think my experience goes back that far. Maybe Shawn can touch on that a little bit. But from the capital improvement side of things, we spent a good amount of time and a good amount of effort participating in a master plan for this community that we finished a couple years ago. And in that master plan, we outlined things like, you know, additional water capacity in our, you know, East Conway Road, where we've got some where we got an industrial district, Center Conway, where we've got residential, those types of things. And we also identified where preferred zones are for types of uses in the community and what needs need to be in place to get to that, so infrastructure. So from our standpoint, having a capital improvement plan in place starts outlining, you know, what are we going to need to do? When are we going to need to do it? And what are the impacts of where that takes us? You know, a lot of the, you know, single-family residential areas are in the master plan targeted for that Center Conway area, but the infrastructure's not there to do that type of stuff. So as for the capital improvement plan, we'd identify things like sewer capacity, water capacity, and needs to where the development should be located, and be able to kind of target our projects in that manner.
Shawn, is there more than, I mean, it's pretty easy to, if you came up with a capital improvement plan that was limited to extending the water and sewer, that's like a 5-minute job. I mean, what else is it, you know, and it's going to be, is the next, and part of that is the next place to extend the water and sewer obvious? Because it stops at Walmart, right?
See,
Does it go down to East Conway?
In my opinion, it is. And Josh touched upon it. So if you go back in time, it was in the mid-1990s. I was working for the town of Conway when we developed the Industrial 2 zoning district, which is in East Conway, essentially from the police station to Mason Brook.
Okay.
And at that point in time, when we started putting that thought process together, the intent was, the Industrial 2 zoning district was going to come into effect just about the same time that the North Conway sewage treatment plant came online, which it did in 1998 or whatever, with the ultimate goal being fairly quickly, water and sewer would work its way down through Redstone, down past the police station to get to the Industrial 2 zoning district. It's never happened. And so what that has done is it's hamstringed realistic industrial development in Conway, because the I-2 district is the only area that we have left, because the I-1 district essentially is full.
But if you have, I mean, I'm not certainly disagreeing with that, but in terms of developing an industrial area, they don't necessarily use a lot of water. I mean, if you have like a Ceramco building, they probably have a couple of bathrooms, and you know what I mean? I mean, why would that stop development there?
Sewer, for one thing. Okay, if if I look at a company, take Lupine, at one point in time, I think Lupine had 80-something people employed there. There's a lot of wastewater that are coming out of that plant just from human activity every day. And then typically, most of these large commercial buildings are going to need fire protection.
Oh, yeah.
There's the big one.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so the planning board, both of us been along, certainly Shawn and I have been longer probably around than you are, Mr. Young Guy over here.
Yeah, sure.
But when you see the ebb and flow, when you have a boom, the planning board tends to get more restrictive. And then when you have a recession, all of a sudden there's a call for, hey, let's loosen it up, and new people get elected to the planning board and things kind of loosen up. So we're definitely in a restrictive mode, and I don't think anybody would criticize the planning board. I mean, Ben and Eliza and Al, I mean, they do a really good job, and they're super serious about it, and they're highly functional. But I have to admit, and I guess I'm asking, is it going too restrictive? And one of the red flags for me was when they had the public art ordinance, which is now off the books too, because of the whole Levitz thing, is that it seemed to me it was like they were becoming art critics. you know, we don't like that look, or it's not New England or something. So, do you guys dare to critique the planning board? You're in front of them
I'll
all
tell you
the time.
what, we're both going to climb under this bus at some point, but so I'll start. I started working with the planning board before I worked with the town of Conway, so around 1990. I've been with many of these boards. And I sincerely think that the planning board that we've had for the last maybe 5 to maybe even a decade has been a good board. Their hearts are in the right place and they're trying to do the right things. But you listen to Ben, and I know Josh has heard it and I've heard it.
This is Ben Colbath,
Ben
the chair.
Colbath, the chairman. He gets calls, you know, and people see things and they scream at Josh, why didn't the planning board stop this project? It's not what the planning board did. The planning board does, I think, a reasonably good job at putting together a decent methodology that we all have to follow. That methodology is actually approved by the voters of Conway. Often people don't understand, I think, what the ramifications of what they're voting for are going to end up being. They see something that the planning board was powerless to stop, and they blame the planning board for it. That's not reasonable.
And I would agree with Shawn that our board as it sits right now is wholeheartedly with their hearts in the right place. And they are stuck between regulating with the ordinances that we have and regulating what the general public wants in some cases. And I think we're starting to move towards, with the master plan development, we're starting to move towards this realm where our ordinances are going to start, I believe, going to start becoming what the people in our community want, and there's more voices now. People are kind of interested in it. And I take this back to the Intervale Hotel at the Vista that I was at. I got a lot of heat on for presenting that one. And what we were is that we were kind of stuck in the fact that that portion of Intervale is zoned exactly the same right now as the Strip in North Conway. And so what we presented for the original hotel design there met all the regulations for that zone. Was it appropriate for that zone? I think that's what the master plan is kind of identified as maybe not. But within the regulations that we had at the time, it was what could happen there. So I think they're in a really tough spot as a planning board where they know, I believe they have a feeling of where our community wants to go, and they have these regulations that are in place, which is why I think the growth management ordinance was presented, because we want to get so quickly to these new regulations. I don't think quickly, but appropriately fast to these new regulations that I believe we all want in place to make this community what we want it to be, sustainable, have appropriate development, but also kind of lean into that, you know, people can live here and we're still a tourist destination location. So that's my opinion.
Just in a nutshell, how much did you change the Indigo Hotel?
I think we lost a story.
Was it?
Of height overall, and a significant amount of rooms, or a decent amount of rooms on that. But that was an interesting process.
Yeah,
to go
I always
through.
say that, you know, I've said this, that I'm always probably the only guy in town that thought the hotel was fine. I mean, it used to be a grand hotel there.
There was.
You know, 100 years ago, before the motel, before Cannell's. So.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think if you look at a lot of the history, not only of Conway, but you look at the history of the North Country, there's a lot of those places that used to exist very successfully. They're gone. And if you tried to bring them back, people would scream bloody murder. But it's kind of, you know, human nature. But as Josh says, you know, every one of us, we're working within the regulations that we have. And, you know, we all watched the debacle that was the Levitt's Bakery thing. And of course, that came from the Conway sign ordinance. Mark, the Conway sign ordinance is virtually unchanged, minutia changes from when I inherited it when I went to work for the town of Conway in the early 90s. What's there, much of it was there in 1987. And things have certainly changed. So we're making an attempt at catching up.
And what is, maybe, Shawn, you could just summarize, what is happening with the ordinances? There's a consultant who's rewriting them all?
Right. And it comes from the process that Josh spoke to earlier. The master planning process took, what, 3 or 4 years?
It was maybe a little bit shorter than that, but yeah, it was a good amount of time.
It was a good amount of time, and ended up well done with a great master plan to build off of. Now, the consultant to the planning board and to the town of Conway is working on rewriting the zoning ordinance much based upon what came out of the master planning process.
And that's when you say the zoning ordinance, you mean all the zoning ordinances?
Best of my knowledge, every chapter.
So that's a pretty big deal. But you have that's what they do. It's a consultant. Yeah.
Right.
So that gets to some of these projects, and I know, how do you balance between what the master plan is, what's the ordinance going to end up? Because like the Ledgewood, which is the one you represent.
Sure.
So you go up there, guy buys a piece of land, I can put X number of houses on it. You go up there, and then Steve Porter's saying, I don't like it, it's too big.
Yes.
And then the planning board has to, blah, 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 negotiate. So I guess one thing is that, can you ever solve the NIMBYism problem? That's one question. And the other thing is that if the growth ordinance, if the new ordinance says, to follow the master plan says, we want much less development, well, that's not going to solve housing, for one thing, right? If you just reduce the...
Right.
So how does...
So a couple pieces there. We're in a weird time in that we have a master plan in place, but not an ordinance that matches it. So, but what we have is our existing ordinances in place and people with land that they have rights to develop within the current rules that are in place. So we're in a kind of a weird spot right now because we had a master plan done in 2002, and then ordinances were modified based on that, and that's what we've been working on since then. Now we have a new master plan, no corresponding ordinances yet. So we're in a weird spot. So when you get a project come in, the client wants to look at what can I do with this land, and there's what can I do with this land, and what is our community going to want this land to look like down the road, and those two conversations are really hard to have with somebody who's looking to develop. And so you bring that information to the table and say, this is ultimately the type of projects that I think are going to be palatable in this area, and work with them to kind of navigate through that. And I think Shawn and I both do a good job being lifelong residents of the area of trying to balance the land development rights that people have and the businesses that we have, and look out for the best interests of our community as a whole. I think we both try to do that.
So when on the Ledgewood, was it like 50 units up there?
52.
52. Yes. So someone like that comes to you,
yes,
and I'm not trying to suggest you reveal some of your client
sure,
secrets, but they say, we can put 70 units on there.
Yep.
And you say, geez, I think we're going to get this backlash, pushback. Yep. Let's do 50. Is that kind of how it works?
That conversation works that way. Yeah, we try to, I think even the number of allowable units on that lot is well in excess of 50 or even 70. And it's a combination of the feel that we have for what the planning board or the community may want or tolerate, what the land can handle for that matter. Certain pieces of land have characteristics that are challenging to develop, topography, wetlands, vernal pool in that area. So there's a bunch of things that you have to balance along with that. But those conversations are definitely had. Some clients receive them better than others, and sometimes those clients go away.
Because you have to anticipate what the planning board's going to
try to, yes.
Yeah. What do you think about, how do you match the growth, how do you match an ordinance with the master plan, NIMBYism, and what the community needs, and particularly these housing projects?
Well, there's the trifecta right there. and it's difficult. And as Josh said, fortunately, from, you look at what density, the number of units you might be able to get mathematically onto a lot. In many cases, that parcel of land is going to be restrictive features that is going to drive that downward fairly quickly. But when, most of the people who are looking at purchasing these properties, I shouldn't say most of them, I don't know any of them that are looking to lose money. They're going to try to make a reasonable profit on the overall project. So now that's where you come into the balancing act. You know that there's, I say no, in most cases there's going to be some pushback from neighbors and abutters and people that have been around. So you do try to find that, somewhat of an adjustment factor that can make it palatable. But as you said, Mark, we're all looking towards housing. But the one thing that we never talk about, and Josh and I don't know how many design charrettes we've been through, but the one thing that no one here can beat is simply the cost of building a structure. We can't regulate that. And at the end of the day, we can't change zoning to make the square footage cost of a building less expensive. And that's where the problem really is coming from.
A friend of mine had a quote for a 2,200 square foot house, not including the land, a pretty modest house. $750,000, $800,000.
Yeah.
How did that, I realize that plumbing's more expensive, but how do you go from, I realize, the scarcity for sure, that's not all going to, developers' profit. Those are reflecting real costs,
yes,
but is it obvious that it's just, materials are up and Labor's up?
There's nothing in the building industry that has gone down in price.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if it's the cost of labor or the cost of materials or the cost of those guys' insurance or the cost of that guy's pickup truck to get to the site. It's all going upward. And $300 a square foot is a very basic entry-level home. And that's for the structure itself. Like that doesn't include the land. That doesn't include a septic or a well or a hookup to the municipal sewer. It's terrifying money.
So 300 times 2,000 is 600 grand right there.
That's right.
Wow.
And it's going to be tough getting there, Mark.
So and you so all these big developments. There's the one you're doing the Locust Lane one too. Josh?
No, we're not.
Okay, you're not involved with that one.
Look,
Okay.
well, actually, that's
Red jacket.
That's Red Jacket, and Kate's helping Jonesy Beach with that, so a little bit.
So we have that one going on. Vesta, of course, we have the Vesta. Then there's the other ones that are going by Settlers Green up there eventually.
Yep.
I think that's New Hampshire Housing.
It is.
It is. Yep.
And then the big one, and I don't know if you involved with the one in back of TJ Maxx at all, either of you guys?
We are not.
Have you been back there?
I've looked at it several times.
So I was trying to turn around and went there just while I was doing it. And so there's like 3 big buildings now, like the size of Saco Woods. And so when we had our breakout here, LA Drew guys were out here, and they were saying that they just had poured or did the site work for the 9th foundation. So they're going to have 9 of those buildings up, like ASAP.
Yeah. It's great.
So okay, so there's that. So I guess that's and you work with Ridgeline.
Yes.
So I guess one thing is the bigger question for you guys to think about is like, where does all this lead? I mean, there are literally going to be hundreds of new units. Now, most of them are multi-unit buildings, but that's got to affect something with supply.
Well, certainly we have right now something about 800, I think there's around 800 housing units approved for construction in the town of Conway.
Really?
Okay, not buildings, units, okay? Already approved. And
like, what am I missing here?
well, I mean, look at all the numbers that are approved at Ridgeline. Look at the ones that are out there behind, TJ Maxx.
Like 200.
That's 200 there.
250
We've got a few hundred at Ridgeline.
There's still 100
overall.
left at Avesta.
Yeah.
So
it adds up.
The numbers are big. Where I think it's two things. I mean, it's certainly going to increase the supply of available housing. I have a suspicion it's going to have to drive the rental prices down because of just the fact supply and demand. But where that puts us in 2 years, it's hard to tell, Mark.
And I'm a member of the Housing Coalition Board, and there's numbers out there that show that, mostly by county, but Carroll County alone is short currently by about 2,500 residential units total. And within 5 or 10 years, that number is going to escalate, and the numbers coming online, even with those numbers that Shawn's representing, the numbers coming online, we're still going to be falling behind down the road. So while it seems like a large number of units to facilitate our needs, and it will have an impact in the short term, it may not keep up with the demand that we have.
I mean, that speaks a lot about where we're going. I mean, we have like 10,000 people in this town. We get 600 units coming online. You got to have another 1,000. Our population get increased by 1,000.
Right.
I mean, is that just sort of as philosophically? I mean, we all have business interests, so we're not against development for sure. You're in the business. I'm indirectly in the development business, right? We're all, the paper certainly is helped by more businesses and all that. But does it ever end? I mean, when I think even like the TJ Maxx one back there, is that all of a sudden if there's 200 people, is there going to be 100 cars coming out on Route 16 on that at 8 o'clock in the morning?
Conceivably, yes. And I think that's the whole balancing thing that Josh and everybody else worked with on the master plan. That's what you're trying to take into consideration, Mark, because at some point our infrastructure isn't going to keep up.
Right.
We need that conversation eventually about water and sewer. Even the roadway. If you look at the north-south road, I believe, is now probably 10 to 12 times more trips per day than it was ever designed for.
Really?
Yeah.
That many more?
Oh, yeah. And, Kearsarge Road essentially has become a bypass, whether or not people choose, Intervale Cross Road down Kearsarge to the north-south. Nobody really likes to admit that, but that's what we've done. And that's where the problem is, I think, going to really start to show its face is in that type of infrastructure that's just not there.
Is that, Josh, is a capital improvement plan, does that address roads?
It should, yes. It would include all that type of infrastructure, roads, water, sewer. And in some cases, it probably might be police and fire infrastructure. You know, if we grow at that rate, do we have the infrastructure necessary to accommodate life safety and those? I think capital improvement covers all of those things.
Where do you think, because I know I was one of the ones against the bypass. I thought it was just a debacle and still do. And but ironically, it's all, you know, on these summer days, it almost seems like we're getting gridlock on the roundabouts on North-South Road down here, and right in front of the paper, actually.
Sure.
You can just see people lined up. So we're almost like gridlock. It's like, oh, hey, we need the bypass. I mean, you guys have any thoughts? I've always thought extend the North-South Road, which is sacrilege to go through Whitaker Woods, follow the railroad tracks the way they did here, so you don't have to go through Kearsarge. Do you have any magic bullets of what
Well,
road?
you know, you think about it, would that help? Briefly, because at the end of the day, we're still, if the bypass originally was going to end just north of Memorial Hospital.
Right.
So, Mark, it would help a little bit. It wouldn't help extensively because, as everybody here knows, during the summer, as soon as Storyland lets out, you know, all bets are off as to what the traffic is going to do.
Certainly
And
help the people on Kearsarge Road.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
it would.
it would.
It would help the neighborhoods.
Yeah,
It would
it
really help the neighborhoods. But still, we're going to have gridlock in North Conway Village. We're going to have gridlock in Conway Village. Right now, you hit Conway Village, try to go through Conway Village at 8:30 in the morning
On a regular day.
on a regular day.
Any day, yeah, weekdays.
And you know, when they're doing all that work on the Four Corners there, you know, and I remember Paul D explaining this 20 years ago, I think, but which is obvious is that, okay, you get more traffic through Conway Village, all it's going to do is back up by Burger King. You know, just squeezing the balloon a little bit. Any thoughts on more roads, Josh, or,
I
we
don't
just
know
live
that.
with it? I mean, Cape Cod is jammed for 3 months a year.
Right. I think it's, you know, if you remember before the North-South Road and when the bypass was a conversation but nothing was in place yet, how terrible it was to move through North Conway Village or just through North Conway. Just couldn't go anywhere. And if you were somehow in the middle of the strip during the course of the peak time, you were never getting out of there. And then the North-South Road came in, and it really was a relief valve for the longest time. And I think it's the volume of visitors that we have accumulated, and whether that increased drastically during COVID. It seems like a lot more people are here more frequently, like weekdays, all there's no downtime. Like maybe you get a couple weeks in the spring where people aren't here, but it's not like it used to be. The fall is just as busy as the summer and the winter. And so I think it's, you know, it helped for a little bit. And I think Shawn's right. But we're also kind of constricted with where we can go with things. We've got mountains and a river on either side of us and not a lot of place to go with it. So I think there are little incremental changes that can be made to help move people through a certain bottleneck. But I think, like we mentioned with the reference to Paul, I think we're just going to hit another bottleneck and we're going to have to resolve another issue down the road. And we're probably going to run out of space to resolve these issues. But I think that's where, you know, the capital improvement plan and looking at those infrastructure improvements wholly through, at least through the North Conway area, in Conway, North Conway is
I mean,
critical.
is there a balance? You know, you look at places like Jackson Hole, and I was there 3 or 4 years ago, and they're, you know, like Conway. I mean, like North Conway. Conway is like at 10,000 people. Their population's declined a little bit because locals can't afford to live there anymore. You know, but I mean, crystal ball, like where does it end? I mean, one is that should there be a philosophy with the ordinances and the master plan, which is already done, I realize that, is that literally want to control growth? I mean, there's a whole faction of people out there legitimately want to say, stop, no more growth, we like it here. I mean, where does that, I always tell this story, but there was someone who moved here like in the late aughts, right? Complained when the hotels are going in. I can't believe it, this place is ruined. When I was here, it was fine. I said, yeah, but you moved here in the late aughts. That was after Home Depot, after Lowe's, after all the people who complained about that. So now there's another level of complaints about the hotels. Is it all relative?
I don't know that it's all relative, but I'm pretty sure that you're never going to stop the complaining. There's going to be people that say we want more growth, we want more jobs, we want more this, we want more that, and there's going to be people that say I don't want any more of it. So you never, again, we're aiming for a balance. But I think too that what's interesting is, you know, when we talk about traffic moving through North Conway, what we have to remember is that this valley goes for a long ways, and a lot of the traffic that's moving through North Conway isn't necessarily stopping in North Conway. They're going to get through here, and they're going to go to Berlin, they're going to go to Gorham, they're going to go north. So everything that we do here is working at solving a problem that may not be a problem that originates here, and that in and of itself makes it difficult.
Yeah, and we're a crossroads with 302 east-west. I mean, we're like the perfect spot for growth. But Josh, like when they're rewriting these ordinances, like whoever the consultant is, like, who sets the tone? Is it, this is a good question for Ryan, the town planner.
Sure.
Is it the planning board that says, oh, let's make these little more restrictive or less restrictive? Like, how does that even work?
I think there's a couple phases to that, because one, going back to the growth management ordinance, when that got tabled, the board had made specific statements that they can address this by making modifications to our current planning regulations. So I believe that the board should leverage the expertise of the people in the community to assist them, because like we said, they're volunteers. They all have their own jobs that aren't necessarily working on the planning board. They have things that they have to do on a daily basis, and they are already committing a ton of time to what they do and just reviewing what we have, that I think they could leverage some expertise of those of us who are in and around to assist with that. And then when it comes to updating the final regulations, so that's the interim, the final regulations, I would like to see some input from a larger group than potentially just the planning board. I think the planning board is the one providing, the master plan provided a context of guide, and then the planning board, I believe, and I may not know fully, but the planning board I believe would be providing guidance to those consultants. But I'd like to see if there were other individuals that could come to the table and participate, like Shawn and myself, I'm sure would volunteer for that. But it would be nice to know what's happening and be able to provide maybe another vantage point for the implications of any decisions that are made.
I mean, it seems as though if they're redoing, these ordinances are complicated. I mean, there's a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
So it seems as though when they drop, so to speak, it's going to be like looking at the Epstein files. And there's going to be like a million things to parse out. Don't you think? I mean,
hopefully not as redacted.
Right.
But no,
not as redacted.
It's not going to be that easy. And as Josh said, this is all coming from the master planning process. It probably should have another group of interested and involved people working with the planning board to put this together. But then remember, it goes back at the end of the day, this is going to have to be approved by the people of Conway.
Right.
And that's where, I don't think I can say often enough, the general populace needs to know that they do still have a say in this. It's boring. It will really suck up a lot of people's time. But if you want to get involved in this and to make a change, now you still have the opportunity to do so. But otherwise, don't complain to the planning board too much, because they're kind of caught in a hard place.
I mean, I always think that voters actually, en masse are just smart. I mean, a lot of results, we're surprised at, and they see it, they just have. But with zoning stuff, I mean, one is just super complicated. You know that everything is recommended by basically everything is recommended by the planning board. Check.
Yes.
I mean, I can't imagine the crossroad of regular people looking through this 500 pages of ordinances and trying to figure that out. How does that, how do the voters get involved with that, Josh?
I mean, if you we've all voted, or I voted in Conway, and even on a regular year, the first part of that ballot is kind of dense. Yeah. I read it because that's what I do on a daily basis, and I make sure that I understand it. And I've already listened to the planning board meetings and the hearings on it, so I generally understand and try to provide input to as many people as possible as to how this would impact things. But if you think about it moving forward, there's our warrant articles. Our warrant is going to be extensive over the next several years as they start implementing new zoning changes, because they're all going to have to be voted on by the community. I think the best thing for anyone getting involved is just try to take the time to understand it. And it is dry and it's dense. And Shawn and I are probably lucky enough to have read enough zoning and planning ordinances that we can navigate through them relatively easily. Or just reach out to somebody who does know a little bit. Like, what does this mean? Ask, if you know myself or Shawn or anybody, or Kate, or anybody that works in these ordinances on a regular basis.
When that ballot comes out with the new zoning, it's not going to replicate exactly the whole zoning ordinance. I mean, that's pages and pages and pages. So it's going to say, oh, we want to change the side ordinance recommended by the planning board, right? So there could be, like, how many parts are there in the zoning ordinances? I mean, there's going to be 50 there, or 20, or 100?
Well, the zoning ordinance is Chapter 190 of Conway Code, but within that Chapter 190, you have all the various zoning districts. There's got to be. There's a lot.
Can you wrap it up into? Can it legally wrap it up so it just appears in a ballot? We want to approve all of the zoning ordinance.
I'm not sure about. I don't know the process on that one in particular.
Yeah, I think that almost section by section, it has to be at least presented at least in a partial format. So they can't, I don't believe they can just say, do you approve of the zoning ordinance entirely as amended? I think it has to be.
It's going to be one heck of a ballot.
I think it is.
I think we've been warned that way by the town staff.
Yeah. Hey, just a quick aside, because one we didn't mention is the Ridgeline. What's going on with the Ridgeline? Like, they come into the planning board, I think, for the medical center?
Yeah, Ridgeline was approved, so there's 9 parcels overall. Those 9 parcels, for the most part, still exist. We had approvals in July of 2022 for all 9 parcels. And then just due to the nature of what's going on in the world, almost every single one of those parcels has changed in some form or format. So, we continuously come back looking at, new alternatives and new proposals. What's up right now next week at the planning board is lot number 1. That's the one closest to Eastman Road, almost right across from Walmart, next to where Duncan's is being constructed, next to Norway Savings Bank. And that's going to be a very large, it's around an 80,000 square foot assisted living memory care building. We actually brought the medical building, which was going to be further up the campus towards Kennett. We brought it closer to Eastman Road.
So that's the next one, and then, not to get way into the weeds about it, but you got the rental units that have been there for the small cabins,
Yes.
houses, whatever you call them, and then there are regular single-family houses being built, like a half a dozen or so back to whatever it is.
Right, that's on lot number 6 is, I think, 21 approved there.
21.
I think 6 are constructed.
What's
Then
next after that?
Next after that, I think we're going to put a great emphasis on lot 1. So that'll be the recreation building, the memory care assisted living building. But then there's more residential going towards Kennett on lot number 8. And then we still have, and it will more than likely be the last one in the mix, is when you drive up Eagles Way on the right-hand side, up high on the ridge, lot number 9, and that, I think, is heading towards single-family homes also.
Wow, it's a lot going on. So with all these units, do you guys have an opinion on John Fuller, what we should do?
Well, honestly, I'll just tell you quickly, I think they did the right thing in not getting rid of it. I think that the John Fuller property, right now, we might consider it, extraneous too much and something that we shouldn't keep. I think 10 years from now, we're going to be really happy we kept it.
Josh?
I agree with that. I do. I think finding the highest and best use for our community is the best thing to do with that. Whether it's moving another nonprofit organization that can utilize that space into there, or I was interested in the small charrette that was done on housing. I know that it was kind of received in a mixed bag, I guess, but at least we're looking.
That was
at,
just to trim off a couple of acres.
I think a couple acres and put housing there. So I think looking at opportunities like that in various parts of our community where we want some residential development, I think is important to consider.
Yeah, I mean that's Josh Busson was a champion for that, and it certainly made sense. I mean, I think I even editorialized against it, because to me, selling that 10 acres there is like selling Shula Park. I mean, not quite, but it's, in 50 years, if we ever sold it for $1 million or $2 million, the people would say, what? How could you do that? That could be a welcome center in 20 years. I mean, it could be whatever.
Right.
And you said, speaking of which, you said the appraisal was not worth the paper it was printed on?
I did say
like
that. And it's interesting because I look, and the example that I would use is, look where the new flatbread is. Okay, that had been Dick and Lynette Delaney's house.
Right.
That parcel sold for $1.5 million, and that was around 2021, and it's less than 2 acres of land. And they're telling me that $1.8 million for 10-point-something acres at John Fuller School, plus that building itself.
And frontage, yeah. And frontage, because that's the old SAU spot building.
In defense, I don't even know. Interestingly, somebody by the name of Bergeron did the appraisal. Don't have any idea who that is. But I think what happens, Mark, is that in the appraisal world, you have to find comparables to make, comps, as they call them.
Right.
You have to find things that you can balance and say, well, this one's similar and so on. Where are you going to find a comp for that building on 10 acres of land? I think that's probably what harmed them.
But I don't know. You guys know the appraisal business more than I do, but that's their job. That's their job.
Right.
Can't tell you.
Okay.
So we hire appraisers.
What do you think it would be worth? Should it be worth? Like, if you put it on the market now, what do you guys think?
Honestly, I'll say it this way. If you put that on the market for $2.5 million,
you'd be there.
I bet it would be gone in the morning.
Yeah, I don't really know what I'd value it at, but it feels like more than 1 point. But either way, that it led to the right decision, I think,
Right.
I think ultimately holding on to that piece of land for our community is in our best interest. While we can figure out if there's, like I said, other uses for it, or like you said, a welcome center or whatever it could be. At least it's ours.
Yeah. All right, good. So let's talk about the rec path.
Sure.
So Rob, could you put up that map just so people understand? So there it is. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. And is that, that's it, right? At the top. So it starts at the Kearsarge Road. You can see there where everybody goes in, right? That's that spot where people go in.
Yep.
Park.
So the rec path, yes, no. I mean, truly the extension of the rec path begins at Mount Cranmore.
Yeah, this
Yes.
is the middle point. This is the Whitaker Woods portion of it.
Yes, right. And that's to the right. That goes down.
Yes.
And how would that, where would that go from starting at the, because it's all by the parking lot by the Cranmore.
Correct.
Where the other one ends. So you'd go through where does it go? How do you get to there to there?
Basically, it crosses from the parking lot at Cranmore. It crosses the access or the entry to Cranmore, runs down Old Bartlett Road. If you're going down Old Bartlett Road on the Cranmore side for about halfway down, and then it switches to the other side of the road where the Brookside condos are, and runs along their frontage within the Old Bartlett Road right of way, and then where the power lines cross,
Right.
it goes up the power lines, or it's proposed to go up the power lines in an easement there to Kearsarge Road to where it's shown on that, or we're showing
Okay,
that
so
picture.
but getting from, and this is, I know, getting a little detailed, but how do you cross the when you say cross the parking lot? What does that mean?
We're proposed to build a pathway on the outer side of the parking lot, so not impact Cranmore's parking area there. Come to the driveway at the intersection of Ski Mobile, Old Bartlett Road, and Cranmore's driveway, and then a crosswalk across by Cranmore sign,
Okay.
and then up Old Bartlett Road from there.
Okay, so when you go on the road, and you say on the road, does that mean you just stripe a little bit on the side of the
We have
road?
a separation, so it would be a separated pathway from the roadway.
So when you're on Kearsarge Road, right, some of it's on Kearsarge Road before you
It
go.
just crosses. It
Just-
crosses
just
across
crosses,
Kearsarge
okay.
Road, not
And
on
just
it.
to refresh everybody, I think I have this right, is that it's really kind of stuck or stopped at the moment, right? Because one is the costs came in at twice as what they thought, and the selectmen got not happy about it was presented as 2 phases instead of 1. And Josh, you represent
Yes,
what's your role in this?
So I was a consultant hired by the town of Conway, who is a partner with the Trails Association. So I'm the town of Conway's design engineer.
Okay, so where is the project now then?
We have completed the design of the project. We have submitted all of our permit applications. We have permitting comments back from wetlands that we did a site walk with the wetlands reviewers, and we have comments back from the wetlands for a portion of the project that runs up to the railroad right-of-way, but not within the railroad right-of-way, which goes to that phased approach that you just mentioned. And so we are prepared to respond to the wetlands. We have updated our design to incorporate wetland comments and are prepared to respond, but have been told to just sit on it we got an extension of our review period, and we're sitting on it for now while the selectmen, I believe, review their appetite to move forward.
So, and Shawn, I want to get to you. You represent because on the northern part where it would come out by Intervale Crossroad, right? So it parallels the railroad tracks for a little section.
Right.
And you represent the railroad? Or you work?
Conway Scenic Railroad.
Okay, so you're on the other side of this discussion.
That's right. And interestingly, from a company perspective, we've said we're not necessarily opposed or a grand supporter of the rec path. I don't feel strongly personally. But I can tell you that, our client, specifically Conway Scenic Railroad, has significant concerns about the number of people that will be, frankly, walking, within the railroad right-of-way adjacent to their railroad. And also crossing, as Josh says, where the proposed terminus is now for phase 1, those users of the rec path, or those patrons, are going to be ending up essentially on the railroad track. Where do they go from there? If phase 2 gets constructed and they cross the railroad track, then we are going to have people actively crossing an active rail line and then walking immediately adjacent to it up to the terminus somewhere at Intervale Crossroad. So there's definitely concerns there.
So what does the railroad want? Well, I think someone said, go ahead, what's the alternative?
I think
then
what
from the
happened
railroad
was
perspective?
originally, if you look back, and Josh knows this probably better than I, but I want to say that the original layout, which was now probably back in 2014, did not have that phase 2 section running anywhere near the railroad. It was actually going further to the west and essentially move it away from the railroad area.
I mean, Josh, I guess one is just politically, like, where do you think, I mean, if the costs are twice as much, so that's a whole fundraising thing. I mean, and, you know, people like Peter Donahoe's not a big fan of it for all kinds of reasons, and a lot of people aren't. I mean, where do you think what are the odds of this of happening?
I'm not sure that I have any input on the odds. I mean, we have a viable project that terminates right at the rail right of way. We have an interested group in the Trails Association interested in working with Conway Scenic Railroad, New Hampshire DOT, who's the owner of the rail right of way that is leased by the Scenic Railroad, at pursuing a project that ultimately extends the pathway to the scenic vista in some level. You know, we've looked at a tunnel under the road. We've looked at ending at the intersection of Intervale Crossroad. Maybe safety modifications there, as we all know. There's a lot of people running back and forth getting ice cream there, and it's not an ideal place to unload people at this point in time from a pathway. So I do believe that we have a viable pathway that is well constructed in an interesting portion of our town that could be built to that terminus location while the other portions of it are mapped out, and the other concerns to the railroad, concerns with crossing Intervale Crossroad, crossing the railroad, bringing people to a location where there's maybe safety concerns for pedestrian access, while those things are all kind of navigated through the next phases of development.
Hey, Rob, could you just bring it up for one more second? So that gray big swath, that's the old bypass corridor, right?
Correct.
So some people have said, why don't you just, instead of where it kind of nicks the bypass corridor, just follow it and it would empty, as you said, Shawn, you said earlier, like north of the hospital. Is that, like, what's the big deal? Well, obviously it's nice to go to the scenic vista because that's a nice terminus for sure. But is there something that's just wouldn't work by emptying out on Route 16? Is that just not a safe spot? Is that how?
There's no sidewalks in that area of Route 16, so unloading pedestrians there would be a significant challenge to move forward from there. The further issue with that layout is how much of Whitaker Woods actually gets impacted through the construction along that bypass area. So a significant portion of that bypass area has a lot of topography where we'd have to switch back a pathway. There may be larger excavation impacts, more tree clearing and cutting in that area than generally following a perimeter trail that exists and it leaves a majority of Whitaker Woods largely untouched. So being on the far outside with the paved pathway allows the remaining portion of Whitaker Woods to remain as is. So that was sort of the back and forth in the early stages of alignment development that we went through. Was it was such a big impact going along the right-of-way, the bypass right-of-way, just from a construction standpoint, that construction costs would be high. They're high right now anyway, but the impacts of construction would be much greater.
I mean, you've kind of addressed it, Shawn, but I mean, everybody knows Intervale Crossroad. How else do you get there? I mean, there's not that much space. You go to the post office parking lot. I mean, you can't get across the railroad tracks. I mean, you got to get across the railroad tracks.
There's no doubt about it. And I know that you've looked, Josh, I think at least at 2 different terminus points in that area. And I think at the end of the day, the bypass is one of these things we're going to be talking about. Excuse me, the bypass. The rack path is going to be one of these things that we're going to be talking about for a while until it finally reaches, some point where everybody's comfortable with it. But right now, if I remember correctly, I want to say it's on the selectmen's agenda for next Tuesday.
What are they going to consider?
I believe it has to do with the funding.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure too. I know that they're looking potentially at, we have a waiver request for one of our wetland responses. It's actually, we're asking for a waiver from the boardwalk design to match the boardwalk design that was on the first phase that they already approved. So it's a very minimal waiver, and I know the select board was, I don't believe they were interested in signing that without talking about the price and the construction costs and whether the project was going to move forward. So I think it's the overall conversation about the pathway and its viability moving forward is on the.
Shawn, Justin, what are the odds? What's the over/under on it being completed in 2 years or 4 years?
Oh, I honestly, 2 years I think is a stretch. But I'd like to see at the end of the day, I think there's more conversation that's needed. And I think that you may have an opportunity to bring people that are in opposition, more to the other side of the table, as long as they feel like they're brought into the process.
All right. So we only got a couple minutes left. Any predictions of what the town's going to look like in 10 years?
Ooh.
Like, what are the major changes? We went through, the North-South Road, that was 20 years ago. I mean, that was as huge as it got, in my mind.
Well, put it this way: if you think of the strip, from the Burger King intersection to the Village, there's not a lot going to change.
A few more hotels. I mean, you got the Friendly's property is there. And
Friendly's properties, there were some approvals for that went away. The Friendly's property is certainly a palette that's available for some artwork. But,
is that a developer's thought?
Yeah. But, then you look, the Village, I think the Village, the changes that have been made to the Village are
This
good.
Village, North Conway.
North Conway Village, I think are good. Frankly, the changes that have been made in Conway Village, I think are good.
Absolutely.
That's come a long ways. North of the Village is still pretty much wide open. There's a lot of opportunity. And as Josh said, the interesting thing, although the ordinances have tightened up a fair amount, there's still a lot of opportunity there. So depending as to, where people's pockets are in terms of financing, the northern stretch of this community could be pretty different in 10 years.
Josh, where are we going to be in 10 years? But maybe ask it in this way too, is that, like, where are we in the development? Where is the interest in development? We went through this to me, we went through the Lowe's boom and those big boxes, and we clearly went through the hotel boom 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. Where are we now? Are we in any sort of boom? Are we in a position of just sort of treading water?
I think our next boom is going to have to be in some sort of residential. I think we're going to have to, and we talked about it earlier, there's a lot of residential coming online. If you look at the north of the Village that Shawn was just talking about, if you look at the master plan, that area is proposed to be modified from a similar highway commercial to it's like a mixed use residential where you've got maybe street side style commercial area with residential above, or a mixed version of that. And then as it comes around to Intervale, it's more of a outer village residential where you've got kind of like smaller homes just outside the village that are walkable to and from. So I think maybe we might see the northern. I think Shawn's right. Everything's kind of already where it's at, except for I think there's a lot of potential north, like Shawn. But I'm hoping that in 10 years, our master plan has come into place, that our ordinances have changed with it, and that we are developing along those lines. So I'd like to see a little bit more, mixed residential use. I'd like to see us helping the people who need to live and work here with their ability to live here. Whether that's through some sort of requirement for housing development as part of commercial development, or anything along those lines that support, residential uses here. But I think the Strip is the Strip. And, I think we're going to see a lot of redevelopment on land there versus new development there, because there's just not a lot of land. But that's sort of my...
Shawn, are we in a boom or out of a boom or treading water?
I'm going to go with treading water.
Yeah.
The phone isn't ringing as crazily as it was. But, what I've seen over now many, many years is that in economic hard times, when money's expensive to borrow and so on, that doesn't affect people that already have deep pockets. They just do different things with their money. It affects those people that have to borrow money to get work done. I don't see this ending, because the Mount Washington Valley is still a very attractive place.
Yeah. Well, good. That's nice. You two guys, I would consider you really the most expert in town on these issues. I'm sure there are other people that come close, but I don't think so. Hey, Shawn, it's been a pleasure.
As always, thank you.
Josh,
Thank you.
thanks for stopping in.
Mr. McAllister, nice job, buddy.
Take care. Oh, wait a minute. I want to take a... Okay. Wait a minute. I want to take a photo of you